Recording in progress.
I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Planning Commission. I think I'd like to call to order a regular meeting of the Planning Commission again. First item on the agenda is a roll call.
Chairman Harper.
Here.
Vice Chair Rose.
Present.
Commissioner Vaughn.
Here.
Commissioner Whitty.
Here.
Commissioner Barnes.
Here.
Commissioner Gordon. Commissioner Mojo.
Here.
Commissioner Gross.
Here.
Commissioner Shanahan.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is public comment on non-agenda, but primarily on non-agenda items. Okay. I have a list of people here who have signed in, so I'm guessing that you would all like to speak. The first person is Richard, and I'm sorry, I can't read your surname.
Your Kunis.
Okay, great. If you could restrict your comments to 5 minutes, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, this won't take 5 minutes. Thank you all for letting me speak tonight. I wanted to take a moment and connect with all of you after watching a recent session a few weeks ago where some concerning comments were made about the neighbors of Andrew Drive, referring to us as noisy neighbors and mentioning a possible lawsuit. Hearing this was surprising to me. So I reached out to my neighbors. None of us were aware of any such concerns. And I want to emphasize the last thing I would ever do is want to harm the community that showed my family and I so much love and support when my home burned down. With that in mind, we made the decision to take out a significant financial burden to rebuild our home. We did this with the understanding that our property was adjacent to a civic mixed-use area outlined in the 2021 PROS plan, not high or medium density housing. This space has so much potential to serve the entire community, whether a library, senior center, or other shared resource for all. Our home is still under construction with landscaping to yet be completed. My neighbor just poured their foundation. This area is already a gathering space, often used for community events like movies in the park, chili cook-off, and serving as overflow parking and bringing people together. I truly appreciate the time and dedication that each and every one of you contribute to our community. I can't say that enough. We can find a thoughtful and beneficial solution for this land, one that continues to make Superior an incredible place for all of us to cherish. Thank you for letting me speak to you tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Michael Hirschfeld?
Michael Hirschfeld, thank you for having me today. Two things can be true at once. The town of Superior is facing a housing crisis with a shortage of affordable homes and a growing demand for housing. This crisis is affecting not only the low income, but also the middle-class families who are struggling to find a place to call home. The town needs to support the housing crisis while also appealing to current residents of Superior wanting parks, trails, and other outdoor amenities. I am one of those families as we moved from Texas some 6 months ago due to the lifestyle change and small town feel we were yearning for. And lucky for us, stumbled upon Superior. In respect to my family's decision on where to build and put down our roots, one of the determining factors was the 2021 Parks, Recreations, Open Space and Trails Master Plan, specifically pages 109 to 111 of the document. Proposed on the vacant land were 4 concepts. Simple as leaving the land as open space to as high level to include pickleball courts, synthetic fields, paths, all abilities playground, and much more. I pictured my 2 boys riding their bikes back and forth between Community Park to Town 15 recreation area, either to have free space to run or bringing their bats and balls to play with their buddies from Superior Dorado Elementary School. Should the board make a decision to rezone Town 15 as residential versus the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Update recommendation of parks, open space, or civic, You are doing a disservice to the many local citizens who have taken their time to respond to town surveys and openly express their desire on how to maintain the vacant land. I started my discussion with the need for the town to assist with the home shortage crisis. The 2024 Comprehensive Plan Update lists 7 other opportunity areas for future land use. As I reviewed Boulder County Housing Authority's website, a few highlights I'd like to share on how they view locations that are amicable for said housing needs. First off, proximity to public transportation, essential services such as healthcare and childcare centers, and lastly, community amenities, recreational facilities or social services. The vacant land on Town 15 does not offer public transportation, is not of walkable distance to any healthcare or childcare centers, and of the list of opportunity areas, the farthest from any rec center, being that Superior does not have one and Louisville being the closest. The town of Superior faces the challenge of reconciling the demand for affordable housing with the community's interest in parks and recreational facilities. It is essential for both this group and the town council to approach this issue with careful consideration, not only for the individuals seeking housing opportunities, but also for the broader population of Superior. This involves making informed decisions about where development should take place and what zoning regulations need to be revised to accommodate these needs. Affordable housing building locations must be balanced against the preservation and enhancement of public spaces that contribute to the quality of life in Superior. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble.
It's all right, it's cheap.
Oh, cheek, okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for hearing my public comment. My name is Tricia Cheek. I live on Andrew Drive in Rock Creek. Yes, that Andrew Drive, and yes, my home backs to Town 15. We had the misfortune of owning one of the homes that burnt to the ground in the Marshall Fire, but we've rebuilt and we're home. In regards to your meeting on the 4th of February, I would like to say that I am personally unaware of any lawsuit towards the town and anyone on our street, and most certainly not from my household. I would also like to say that we as a community are not what I would consider noisy, but you most certainly have our attention. I would like to respectfully request direct engagement between yourselves, the residents on Andrew Drive, Alpha Court, Ajax Court, Bristol Street, and the town staff and council and any other appropriate groups. The future of the Town 15 parcel impacts the entirety of Superior, and the conversation is complex. There are many factors to consider, regardless of the type of development or non-development, from traffic, environmental impact, and wildfire mitigation to the town's overall goals and vision. We rebuilt our home with the knowledge and understanding that the parcel was slated for a park of some sort via the Master Plan of 2021. While I would never want to impede the discussion to make a change, the surveys, professional consulting, and public outreach have already been done. What is the reason and desire for a potential zoning change? I think I'm in agreement with my fellow neighbors in that whatever the answer, a final binding decision is to the benefit of everyone. It will ultimately save time and effort and prevent future commissioners and council members from having to tackle this issue again. Please include us in your discussions. Help us to better understand the urgency this decision now seems to carry. We're neighbors. The potential rezoning of a parcel that has been vacant for more than 30 years should include and ultimately benefit everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Shannon Coate?
Hi, thank you for hearing me tonight. I'm a little nervous, so if I mess up, bear with me. I am Shannon Cody. I live at 2420 Andrew Drive, and I've lived there for 23 years. I'm here to talk about the rezoning. We watched your last meeting, and it was a little disappointing and somewhat hurtful to be referred to as the NIMBY Street or noisy neighbors, and maybe someone bringing a lawsuit up, which I've never heard.
I apologize for interrupting, but if you could speak up, that would be helpful.
Sorry. I had never heard about a lawsuit, but what I'd like to say that I feel our section of Rock Creek is now in our street, Andrew Drive in Bristol. We are a neighborhood that is still in need of support as we are healing from the Marshall Fire. We are the largest section of the upper Superior Rock Creek area that burned 38 homes on our street and Bristol. And we're all just still trying to recover from this huge natural disaster. We have trauma, PTSD, anxiety, grief, and many other mental health issues that we're dealing with as we're all recovering. Our 2 streets are not even done rebuilding. There's 9 more homes that have to start, which could take 2 to 3 more years from what I've seen this last 3 years. My home was a standing home that was severely smoke and fire damaged, but I have lived with the stress and living surrounded on 3 sides by total losses. And my husband and I lived in the rubble and ruin of other people's lives for 8 months until it was cleared. And for the almost 2 years after that of the rebuild, which is still in full force. And the rebuild, and it is fantastic and wonderful. I'm so grateful my friends and neighbors are back. And not everyone yet, but almost. But it's been extremely stressful. It's loud, it's dirty, it's scary with all the possible toxins, with the intense wind across Town 15. And I just wanted to say how we're still in severe stress. At least I am, having lived there when we now know we shouldn't have for this whole time. We were only out for about 5 weeks and came back to an unsafe area and an unsafe home. So that's what we personally are dealing with. And we do know that something will happen. Something has to be rezoned on that area. And I'm just asking also to go back to the Prost decision that I thought was made a few years ago, and just to vote for some type of civic, parks, rec, something like that instead of homes. Because to have the kind of stress it would take to build an entire neighborhood when we're still recovering is just almost too much to bear. My husband is a teacher for Boulder Valley Schools, and he teaches in Lafayette and has found been there to the city of Lafayette's. They have a wonderful park that's called Nature Kids Discovery Zone Inspire Trail, and it's been built from state and lottery grants. And it can have young, old, all the children, disabled people, everybody can walk and learn about nature in a natural setting. That could be a great idea for some way to lead into the open space. Also learn about nature and all the animals that are there. Maybe there could be a plaque recognizing all the people whose homes were lost, and learn about wildfire education and the Marshall Fire. So with all these kind of rather emotional feelings about it, I ask for some extra consideration for the people of Andrew Drive and Bristol at this time, because I feel that things have changed, and I feel that people's needs and mental health issues need to be respected now that things have changed and people have lived through this natural disaster. But I thank you for your time and consideration, and thank you for your care of Superior.
Thank you for your comments. Robert Harris?
Hi, y'all. Thanks for having me. I'm Rob Harris. I live on Ajax Drive, and we just recently rebuilt one of the first houses on that cul-de-sac. I don't want to repeat too many things. I'll try not to repeat things that have already been mentioned, but a couple of things that I wanted to mention before the rezoning. Certainly hoping to still keep it from going into residential zoning. I think one really valid point for that, I'm not sure how many people experienced driving out during that Marshall Fire. I was working as a handyman in Boulder at the time, and luckily got a group text from a buddy that let me know about it and was able to warn my wife, and she got our dogs and our passports and warned some of our loving neighbors and now family and friends about it. There was very little warning, as a lot of you guys know. But traffic getting out of there was a nightmare, and we were some of the first people to try to leave. And where Town 15 is, there are only so many routes to get out of there. And I just think back on it, and I thank goodness that schools weren't in session. So the more that I think about that being a residential possibility, the more I just hope that people can learn from history about how blessed we are that that was not more of a disaster. As much as I'm not minimizing how big of a deal that was, it could have been so much worse. The only other thing is just really grateful for the chance to speak my truth and my experience. I was able to go back in there and try to gather some things, and during the fire. So I witnessed not only trying to get out, but going back in and watching people still in total panic trying to get out of there. So I'm stuck with those memories. Grateful that my wife believed me, because I'm the kind of guy that buys mace every year and probably cries wolf too often, but she heard me and got people together and rallied. So I'm just grateful for the way it turned out. But I'm also totally prepared now for this happening in the future. The more I watch the news, the more I see these natural disasters, the more that I'm just not surprised. Even way back in the day, I experienced a tornado in the middle of Boulder when I was at Platt Middle School. So you never know what's going to happen. I just think it's silly to pack a bunch of people in a place that they can't safely get out of. That's probably my biggest point. I know we need to rezone it, but I'm just looking out for people's safety and grateful that we're all here to talk about it today. And I appreciate y'all's transparency and hope for that in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Jenna Eisler?
Oh, he spoke for me.
He spoke for you.
Sorry, I just thought we were signing in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments too then. Kali Prasad?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity. So, along with my neighbors, I live on Andrew Drive, back into Town 15. So, little quick story, as Rob mentioned, on the fire day. We are a young family. My son was 9 months. My daughter was 3 when the fire happened. Both were having a RSV virus. Next day, in the morning, first thing, I did not come to check the house. I went to emergency, take my daughter, because I felt that life was important. Then I came to know we lost everything in the fire. And also on the same day evening, when we rushed out and I saw my house on the 9 News burning live, literally, I see my house, I see Chad and Trisha house catching the fire. I saw both the houses either side. And the next thing is, me and my wife, we wanted to bring my young family in a wonderful neighborhood, kind of a small town, not a concrete jungle or in a busy, crowded neighborhood. One of the reasons we want build was, as for the plan, 2021 process plan, that's kind of a promising, okay, it's going to be exactly the same. And we put in everything we had, and no FEMA, no SBA, I stress. We didn't get a penny from any of the FEMA, SBA. Now, still, we're living in the construction rebel zone. The lot next to my house is still, they just poured the concrete to fill the foundation. The reason, one thing as a family, along with my neighbors, is to keep the place as an open space or in a park. And also I see, we use this place as whenever we have an events in the community park, as an extra parking, as kind of an extra space. We feel this being open space, recreation will help to serve the community and gives us the charm, the small town feeling what we have. And also, one thing I stress what Rob mentioned, because when we got out of the house, we thought we were going to come back. Only when we're getting out, we understand, oh, this is, oh my God, something great. But so we were stuck like more than 50 minutes right across on the Indian street, not to come back now, not to get back our essential or documents or passport, anything. And also, every day when I wake up and I see the town 15, I feel it's in a huge wind corridor. The way, I don't know, we notice every day, when we get a wind nighttime, it shutters all the new windows and doors. It's so intense. Every time when I see that, this is place, oh my God, we don't get one more time fire. So I feel having extra ones, making it more densely populated, it creates more dangerous going forward. With that, that's my few comments. I don't want to repeat all my neighbors' side. Thank you for giving me an opportunity and sharing my thoughts. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Heidi Javaz.
Hi, I'm Heidi Jarris. I also live on Andrew Drive. I think a lot of my neighbors covered many of the comments that I had to make tonight. But the main thing that I didn't hear in the discussion that was recorded from last time is I didn't hear any discussion of the fire issue and the risk that particularly putting up dense residential would enter into an already very risky area. That space is right across the street from nothing but dry brush that we all have experienced, can burn and spread very quickly. I was one of the lucky ones to have my home survive this. My fence burnt down, but my house didn't, by pure luck of the winds blowing whatever way they were. Had that been residential, dense building, even civic, I mean, I don't know the difference. I don't know anything about fire mitigation, how quickly a commercial building burns versus and spreads a fire versus residential. But I strongly believe had that been residential, there would be many more homes on Andrew Drive that would have burned on that day, including mine. So I just strongly urge this committee to put fire mitigation at the very top of their list when they're thinking and how close it is to a burn-prone area when thinking about developing. The only other ask I would have is to take with a grain of salt what the consultants are recommending. The consultants, I noticed, was quite pushing for affordable housing and residential and noted herself as being a neutral party. And I know we've probably hired her to be that, but consultants have businesses and interests of their own, and they have relationships with developers of their own, and they don't live here, and they don't have to live with the long-term consequences of whatever we do with that land. So I just ask that you put the input of the community above the input of a consultant that is not part of the community. Lastly, I want to thank you. This is thankless work that you do. This is, real community service to us, and I know it's not easy. I know it's very complex. So I wanted to thank you for your time on this committee. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am. Is there anybody else in Town Hall who would like to speak? Sir.
Sorry I didn't sign in. My name's Walter O'Toole. I am a resident on Andrew Drive. I am relatively new. Me, my wife, and our 3 young kids moved in about a year ago. And I don't want to repeat what others have already said, but at the time we moved in, we were aware of the 2021 Post Master Plan, and that was appealing to us. That was a big reason why we moved to Andrew Drive, was the potential for that space to become a park or to remain open space. And that's really all I have to say. That's what we would like to see happen, but I know that you all have tough decisions to make. So as I mentioned, this is a thankless job, and I was not here obviously for the fire, but clearly everyone here has been through a traumatic experience, there's a lot of trauma in the room. So the only thing I would add would be just, taking that into consideration. Whatever you decide, how you decide it is almost equally as important, and making sure that the community who lives there is involved in a meaningful way. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Sir.
Thank you. My name is David Noodleman. I live on Andrew Drive. I'm a relative newcomer. I've been there for about 3 years now. I was going to say a lot until I heard everyone else speak, and they brought up very valid issues that I hope you all are really taking to heart. As the one woman not suggested, but she stated that it's a consultant that's coming up with a plan. Well, I'm sorry, but consultants are very sided, regardless of what they say, because at the end of the day, who's paying the consultant? So in that regard. Also, I do know, I noticed that the fire department couldn't even handle the fires that had burnt down, let alone having to consider a whole new development. I mean, that's just ridiculous. They can't even handle what they currently have. At least that's what it appeared to be, and it proved out that way. So, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Anyhow, mostly what I want to say is I am absolutely against any type of housing going on back there. I think the best use of that land is for open space or for parks, which would only lead to the betterment of the community, which we all reside in. I hope, and that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We have one, is anybody else in town hall? We have one person on Zoom.
If you'd like to speak on Zoom, please hit the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen.
Stephanie Hirschfeld, if you'd like to raise your hand, if you'd like to speak. Not seeing a hand. Going, gone. Thank you. Okay, last opportunity in town hall. Let me just say thank you all for coming and commenting this evening, and I think we'll close public comment with that. The next item on the agenda, I think, is the approval of the minutes from February the 4th. Does anybody have any comments or amendments to the minutes? No? Would somebody like to move approval of the minutes?
I move to approve the February 4th Planning Commission meeting minutes.
Second.
All those in, do we need a roll call on that?
We do, yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
fine.
Well, I think
We
we
don't,
do.
nobody's online.
Oh, nobody's online. Bree is online. All right, you can read.
Yeah, if no one's online, we don't need a roll call.
Sweet.
Okay.
Thank you, Bria.
In that
No
case, all
problem.
those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Our next item is an update on the Chapter 16 Land Use Code for accessory dwelling units, residential occupancy, and minimum parking requirements.
Can I just,
Sure.
if I might, just before we start, I wanted to speak, at least for myself and perhaps for the rest of the Planning Commission, to thank you all for attending tonight. Your voices are important, and the opportunity for you to speak is necessary as part of this whole process. But it is a process. There are no decisions going to be made tonight or next week. The comprehensive plan schedule has opportunities for you to participate, and I personally encourage all of you to continue to participate in those discussions before the opportunity for the Planning Commission to come up with its vote, which would then go to town council for their vote. So continue to be involved, continue to express your viewpoints. It's very important that the community hears from you and others in this process, not only with regard to Town 15, but frankly, with the entire comprehensive plan. And so, again, I speak for myself, but I think I speak for the commission when we say thank you for coming. This is not a thankless job. This is a thankful job. And we are thankful that you are here because it's important for us to hear.
Can I ask a question?
You want to ask a question? Sure, you can ask a question.
Sure. They keep on saying zone updates, but that's not what happens in the comprehensive plan, correct?
Correct, yeah. So, I mean, it's a designation. It doesn't formally change zoning. I think you all know the property is zoned commercial, right? So that's the legal zoning for the property. But what the comprehensive plan does is really sets the stage for, any change to land use policy, right? So it's the opportunity for, as a community, for all of us to come together and collectively decide what we want on these parcels. Again, it goes through a process. This is, the whole process is going to take about a year, right? So we're about a third of the way through. We're planning extensive engagement this spring and summer, and then we'll come back to this planning commission and then the town council and make those final recommendations. And then that lives in the comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan is not a development plan. It doesn't rezone the property. Any kind of further action would be required after that. But it really does kind of set that unified vision for these properties. Technicality.
Was I a little hasty in moving on? Do any other commissioners want questions, comments? Renee.
Interested in zoning stuff, you're welcome to stay.
Come see what the planning commission is going to talk about tonight. Oh, don't leave. Don't leave us alone.
They watched the video of the last one.
Thanks for y'all's time.
All right, we have a stayer. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I'm curious.
Yeah. All right, good evening. My name is Renee Stavros. I am a planner for the town, as you all know. And this evening, we are discussing changes to our land use code, chapter 16, and the bills that passed last year for occupancy limits, HB 24-1007, accessory dwelling units, HB 24-1152, and minimum parking requirements, HB 24-1304. If you remember, was it October of last year? We've been kind of discussing some of these bills as they were approved by the legislature last year and discussing which ones were going to be coming. And now these three are here this evening for your thought and recommendations for the town council. Oh, maybe that's not gonna work. There we go. All right, so first we're gonna talk about prohibiting residential occupancy limits, HB 24-1007. This bill requires that jurisdictions throughout the state remove residential occupancy limits based on familial relationships. So we are changing all of the code references throughout the code, including in chapter 16, but also throughout other sections of the code. We're replacing family with household, and then single family, two-family, multifamily, and multiple family, the word family with the word unit. That is pretty much all for this one. I'll ask, when we can go through the whole thing, and then at the end, if you have questions or comments, we can.
Maybe take questions on each section.
Should we do, okay, go for it.
Does this apply only to 16-1-70?
No. So this particular, so that it eliminates 1-70.
Yes.
But then we also, at the same time, are replacing the words family with household
With
and
unit.
unit throughout the code. So it
Got it.
eliminates that one section, and then it replaces the verbiage throughout the code.
Got it, okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no problem.
So they, a house it has a limit of people, but now those people do not have to be related.
Correct. So the existing code allowed 3 unrelated people to live in one roof, and now it doesn't, the occupancy limits doesn't preclude people from having a familial relationship. So you could have 6 people, as long as it meets health and safety codes of the building code, or like fire code or things like that. Health and safety still applies, but it doesn't limit me from having a significant other and then them having their parents and then me having my parents all live in one house, because that would be 4 different familial relationships. Or if you're in your 20s or in your 60s and you want to live with friends or something like that, and you live in a 4 or 5 bedroom house, you all have your own room. It doesn't prohibit all of you from living in one house.
So it's just based on bedrooms now and people fitting in the bedrooms?
It all falls back on the property maintenance code. So we've adopted the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code, and I don't know it off the top, but there are regulations related to how many people, can be in X square feet of a bedroom or, cooking facilities. I would also say I am unaware that we have ever enforced our occupancy code as it was written previously. Occupancy codes are difficult to regulate because it's hard to prove who lives in a home.
How would you know?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. But we can fall back on the property maintenance code if we become aware of an unsafe situation.
Okay. Next is the fun one. HB 241150, accessory dwelling units. This particular bill passed last year requires all municipalities to allow accessory dwelling units in all zones that allow single-family detached units, or now detached single units. It requires us to allow a detached ADU, an attached ADU, and all of these scenarios that you see here are permitted anywhere there's a single unit home. And this applies also to all planned developments within the town. So think about Rock Creek and Coal Creek Crossing, Sagamore, all of the planned developments also have to allow ADUs, whether or not you have HOAs that currently have laws against them. Those are no longer valid. This takes precedent and they are permitted.
Also, the single-family units in downtown Superior.
That's correct. So we'll go into the details of what we can and can't limit in the next couple of slides. But generally speaking, anywhere there's a detached single unit home, accessory dwelling units are permitted.
And is what you're showing here, is this any different than what I know we're going to allow in HOAs where we would, but are these is it any different than what we allow right now?
in original town where we have, like, our current ADU code allows it in our RL and RM zone districts, which are in original town. And these would all be, all of these types of ADUs would be allowed in our current code. There are some changes that we have to make to that code. At the same time, we're making the changes to apply them to all of our PD districts.
Okay, but I just wanted to kind of talk, what we approved a couple of years ago is basically what we have here for the limited area of RL and RM.
That's correct, yeah.
Renee, one more question back to the previous slide. I think I know the answer, but it seems like if there is an ADU, it's got to have a separate exterior entrance in some form for the ADU?
Yes.
So that would mean basically, from a practical standpoint, a home would either need to have a garage, I guess, access to the garage, or if it was a house with a walk-in basement, then that could be converted. But if you don't have a walk-in basement, it makes it pretty difficult to make an ADU.
It does, yeah, you could create a vestibule where there's like a main entrance and then an entrance to the primary structure or primary unit and then an entrance. And that would all have to meet like fire codes for separated units. But you're thinking along the right line.
Thanks.
So every one of the reds are the ADUs,
That's correct.
and they all need to have a separate entrance. You can't walk through that, the single unit in order to get to that.
That's correct.
Well, where does it, I didn't see, I was going to ask that question too, because I also thought I knew the answer, but I didn't see that specifically stated anywhere, the entrance issue.
It's a building code requirement and a fire code requirement.
I think I saw in here the word independent living facilities, so I think
Yeah.
that must encompass an exterior entrance or separate entrance.
If it does, that's great.
But it didn't specifically state that, I assumed that.
Yeah, Renee's correct. It will be part of, we plan on adopting, there's an appendix in the IRC that's really in the 2024 International Residential Code that covers ADUs. And so that section of the code doesn't come to Planning Commission, but when we take this to Town Council, we plan on bringing the components related to the building code under the IRC, which does regulate kind of fire separation, HVAC, when you need fire suppression, fire separation, entrance configurations, what have you. So some of this is regulated in the building code, which again, that would come as a package to Town Council.
And I assume if you build one of the extensions, then it has to meet the current building code that even if the old house is 20 years old and built to that code, the ADU would have to be built to the current code.
Any new construction always has to meet current codes, but if you're not touching, a portion of the home, you're leaving that alone, you don't have to bring that up to code. But yeah, all new construction or new conversions internal will have to meet new codes.
Okay, so along with these changes are changes to our Chapter 16 code, the schedule of use tables and the schedule of requirement tables. So we are adding accessory dwelling units as a permitted use in the RE, RVL, RL, RM, MU, and AUR, as well as all planned developments. And then
I thought AUR was agricultural or something.
It is.
It allows single-family homes.
Right.
So any zone district that allows a single-family home, we have to add it.
And then we're also changing some of the tables for bulk, setbacks, density, open space requirements in each of those above zone districts. And then we're amending the accessory use regulations to remove items that are regulated within the building code. So as they relate to Section 166160. This is the actual accessory dwelling units section of Chapter 16. These are items that we've discussed with town council last year, or, yeah, town council, it was the then town board. And they gave us direction on some of these items, and so these items have been, are what staff has come up with that meet the regulations of the state bill and coincide with what the council and you all talked about during our work session with the council last year. So only one ADU is going to be permitted on each single lot. So whether it's a 2-unit or single-unit dwelling on the lot, only one ADU is going to be permitted per lot. ADUs cannot be larger than 50% of the square foot of the principal dwelling unit or 750 square feet, whichever is greater. This 750 square foot is an add from what I sent you. We realized that if a home is 1,200 square feet, the bill requires us to allow 500 to 750 square foot ADUs, so we added this. So this is that's a little new piece. And then design and development standards. ADUs are subject to to the development standards for each zone district and planned development as applicable, but there are not architectural requirements for ADUs.
Can I don't want to go past it. So, why, let's start there. Why no architectural requirements apply to ADUs?
So when you look at, in original town, we don't have architectural requirements. So our code doesn't have architectural requirements. So in original town, we already don't have those. In Rock Creek, for instance, there are architectural requirements for the homes to be built in Rock Creek. However, those design requirements and architectural requirements in Rock Creek are from the 90s and may or may not be applicable to what construction looks like today. There are some new guidelines because of the homes that were rebuilt, but it was the direction of the council that we, as staff, not be required to determine whether or not something is architecturally we are not the ones who need to be making those choices, and residents can make them for themselves.
And who would then make those choices?
So yeah, I'll add a little bit more to this. So the bill, just as a little bit of background, the bill says we, as a jurisdiction, can apply architectural standards to the degree the standards apply to the single-family home.
Right.
So we couldn't in original town because we don't have architecture standards for the single-family home, therefore we can't. But for all of the remaining neighborhoods, to the degree there's a standard in the FDP, we could apply those standards. Now, generally, all those neighborhoods have HOAs that regulate the design, and the HOAs are generally the people that review. You know, the town doesn't review architecture for anything that comes in Rock Creek other than heights, setbacks, lot coverages, and what have you. So we'll regulate those for the ADUs. When we say development standards, that's height, setbacks, you know, lot coverage, things like that, and then can leave the architectural review to the HOAs. And that's typically how we have done it for single-family homes, once beyond the date of first CO, right? So kind of first CO, the home has to match what's in the FDP. If they want to make any change over time, provided it meets the basic zoning, we usually leave it to the HOAs to regulate. So the HOAs can regulate the architecture to the degree they're allowed in the state bill. And that was the position of council, similar to how we regulate additions on a home.
I understand what council said.
Sure, y'all can make a separate recommendation.
I'm not on council.
That's fair.
The state said, to the extent that there are architectural requirements in a particular community, we're not going to, the state law did not take away those.
They can't be
necessity
more
for
restrictive than what is
It
required.
can't be
Yep.
more
Yeah.
restrictive than it already exists.
Yeah.
We're taking architectural requirements completely away as
From-
far as the ordinance is concerned.
I think what Lisa was saying is it's not, we are not going to require those as part of the building permit process, but in Rock Creek, for example, there is a design review committee, and any exterior or changes to anything in Rock Creek require a review by the design review committee, and they have the ability to limit exterior changes to the degree that it's allowed in the bill, which is to say that it can't be more restrictive than they are on their primary. Yep. Okay.
I see where we're working, but I'm still not sure that there's Rock Creek, there's downtown Superior, there's Coal Creek Crossing, there's Calmonte 2.
Yep.
There are a bunch of places where there are architectural requirements but what you're saying is that if there was a request for an ADU to be built in all of those areas, what you're saying, I want to make sure that I'm getting it right, is that before a permit would be required, before a permit that would be approved, you as the department are going to make sure that wait a minute.
Okay.
That they have gone through the architectural requirements of those communities.
We don't regulate HOA. That's not a requirement of the town.
And so that's what I'm concerned about, is
Yep.
because there's no way for, if an ADU, if a house was to be built in Rock Creek, right? But let's just say we did a couple of rebuilds just as a result of the fire. If somebody came.
To be
before
clear, the rebuilds were a little different. We did require the homeowners submit authorization from the Rock Creek HOA because there was so much, I think, conflict initially. We wanted to make sure that everybody was, but other than that circumstance, the town does not request any HOA documentation for any projects, right?
We have a blanket statement that we put on most of our planning reviews that says, if you're part of an HOA, you may be required to submit these plans through them for additional whatever. I don't know the exact verbiage, but it's something along those lines that goes on almost all of our comments when we go to approve things.
And I assume then what you're saying is that that particular comment would be on the application for an ADU building permit.
It would coincide with either our comments for them to resubmit or our approval of their permit. So they could receive a permit without having had the HOA's approval with a note that says, you may be required to submit these plans for HOA approval. So they could get a building permit, but then the HOA is responsible for ensuring that they review those things. Just like they come around and, issue you citations for other things, they will then issue citations.
I have some insight into this.
Please.
So as someone who has put a shed on my property, which requires no input from the town, but lots of input from the HOA, who I guess is looking over fences because but they required us to paint it the same color as the house. The siding had to go in the same direction and be close enough as the same width. The roof had to match. It needed to be similar. And we had to get it approved from the HOA.
I just want to make sure that as we go through this process, in those areas where there are architectural requirements to structures in those areas, that we alert the appropriate HOA or
they'll find it.
entity to say that if somebody comes and wants to do an ADU, the
I think-
architectural parts are up to you.
I think that last statement is misleading and makes it sound like architectural requirements cannot apply to ADUs.
Right.
I think it needs to be reworded so that you're letting the city off of architectural requirements, but not giving free rein to everyone to avoid HOAs.
We'll pull up the language in the ordinance. That's just the language that we put in the presentation. But the
I'm on the
language-
design review committee for Coal Creek Crossing, so I'll consider myself notified.
So I think the actual language, and if you think it's not clear, and some of the language we can make it more clear on our packets, so we also intend to create kind of like a whole guidance program, right? You want to build an ADU, here are all the things you need to know,
Yeah.
right? It's,
Yeah.
keep going, Renee. There you go.
Here we go. Okay. So an ADU is subject to the development standards that are established for each zone district or plan development as applicable. If the applicable plan development, including a final development plan or final site plan, includes standards for architecture such as pitch, roof pitch, architectural compatibility, material color, etc., these standards shall not apply to the ADU.
And we're silent on the fact that the HOA might have standards, but we're silent on that all throughout our code.
No, that's different.
Compatibility, I would think they'd, yeah.
Show me again, where are we? Because I printed this stuff
We
out.
are on
So my interpretation
Number
of
3?
Yeah, let's just listen to the architect.
My interpretation of the statute's language is to prevent homeowners associations from denying a homeowner from building an ADU based on a subjective objection to the architecture that they're proposing.
I think, without understanding the intent of the lawmakers, I think that is an effect of the ordinance, right? If the statute, there has to be really clear, objective architectural standards that, apply to the single-family home, and the degree they apply to the home, you can apply that same standard to the ADU. So if it's, using the Rock Creek example, right? If it's in their covenant somewhere that, the shed has to match the color of the house, then they can say that. If that's probably just a rule that they apply, they might have a difficult time enforcing that. But again, all of that will happen at the HOA level. The town's ordinance, again, proposes just to do height, setback, lot coverage, what have you.
I mean, HOAs typically have more than one document. I mean, there's covenants, codes, and restrictions, and then there's rules that they can change.
Sure.
So,
Let me make sure I'm
Do you have concern with the language as drafted? Is that what you're getting?
Are you saying that the statute that was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor has that last sentence in that is up on the board on number 3?
No, so we
put
have
that.
created, this is our language, and this applies to anywhere where that the straight zone district applies to.
Right.
And we don't write our code to apply to PDs, but PDs, should they have those things, that's why I have it in my, presentation that
Which is why I'm raising the issue, because the first sentence, which says an ADU is subject to the development standards that are established for each zone district or plan development as applicable.
So it might
I have a problem
be,
with that. It's the last, then we've lined out all this other stuff, and then we added another sentence. And I'm having a little problem with it because it says to me that if the PD, the plan development, has architectural standards, they don't apply to ADUs.
so maybe what I hear is we could add clarifying language to an ADU is subject to the development standards, including setbacks, height, lot coverage. We go through the actual standards that apply, or to clarify that these are the standards that apply. And then the second sentence, if the applicable, plan development includes standards for architecture, those standards don't apply.
No, I guess what I'm saying is, I'm saying that the state law does not require us to have that second sentence.
That is true.
And the state law does not require us to say that ADUs do not have to apply to architectural standards such as roof pitch.
That
and
is
material
correct.
and color.
The state law would be more limiting than the draft in front of you. The state law would allow us, to the degree they exist, apply architectural standards.
Correct.
Yes.
And I'm saying is that by approving this, we're taking away that and giving people who want ADUs the opportunity to not have to comply with the architectural standards of the community that they're building it in.
So the way that, I understand where you're coming from, but so we're saying that they don't apply to an ADU if they're written into like the final plat site plan or the final site plan. Like we, as staff, review planned development applications based on the zoning in the planned development. And so
I understand. I'm trying to keep you out of the business of having to deal with the idea that it has to be architecturally in accordance with the plan. What I'm saying to you is that by saying it this way, we're giving a blanket authorization to ADUs to not comply with the architectural standards of the community in which it's going to be built.
That's the language as drafted. You all can discuss and make a recommendation if you.
I don't see any reason for us to do that.
Well, I think this last sentence, the last part, these standards shall not apply to the ADU, should be like, these standards will not be enforced by the city or something like that.
I don't think we want to write a code that says we have a standard that we're not going to enforce.
Why not just delete the last one? I don't understand.
Well, because I think we want to make sure it's really clear that, again, we always have to assume none of us are here in 5 years, and somebody's going to read a permit and they're going to know if they pull up the FDP, they need to know what applies and what doesn't, and there's no question.
I guess I'm going to go.
Why don't you just add a phrase that says something like, I mean, you can wordsmith it better, but if you said, but if the planned development includes, I mean, an HOA that has standards, those standards would apply.
We can't regulate what an HOA is going to decide to do.
Well, but I'm not saying you have to regulate it, but if an HOA, what I think we've said verbally is if the HOA has standards, then the HOA can apply those standards to the...
If they want to, yeah.
If they want to. And I think what Lonnie is saying is we need to make that clear, because otherwise you're saying, by omitting it there, you're effectively saying somebody could look at that code and go tell the HOA, no, your standards no longer apply, because the town code overrules them.
I don't think the town code would overrule the HOA covenants.
I think this says it does. I think it says it does. And again, we're doing this exercise of amending the town code because the state said, this is what we have to do, and this is what you will do, and this is, and going beyond what the state is requiring for us to do. To my mind, we need a really good reason to be able to do that. I don't see the reason for this. I do not support it.
So I guess to be clear, and I'll let maybe the town attorney chime in, but if the town passed a regulation that says everybody can have 8-foot tall fences, I'm not aware that would require HOAs to allow 8-foot tall fences, right? So I think to the degree an HOA isn't preempted by the state law, they could apply something more strict within the bounds of the state law. But maybe town attorney May, do you want to chime in a little bit here?
That's the question. I mean, can are HOA requirements more or less restrictive? I mean,
They are more.
Is the town code the governing factor, or is the HOA the governing factor?
Usually the more restrictive of the two is the governing factor. Go ahead, Bria.
I'm sorry, am I answering the chairman or am I answering you, Lisa? Or would you mind repeating your question?
How how would you apply what's written in that second sentence? If the applicable plan development, including a final development plan or final plat site plan, includes standards for architecture, such as roof pitch, architectural compatibility, material color, etc., these standards shall not apply to the ADU.
I guess, would that override the HOA's ability to apply architectural review to the degree the state law allows it?
I would read it as it does override what the HOA can require.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And personally, I understand you're taking also guidance from the town council, but I would take out the word not.
Just delete the last sentence, I don't know.
Well, I think if you want to get rid of not, then I think you could just say it's subject to the development standards
I
in the.
think the ADU is subject to the development standards of the community that the ADU is being put in.
It's interesting. So
And if there's, and if there's no standards for original town, there are no standards.
Right.
But there are standards for these other communities, and I can't understand why we would want to give that opportunity to an ADU to not comply with what those standards are.
Bria, how would you write it? So I think the idea from the staff's perspective is that we don't want to be applying architectural standards that are like elevation drawings from an FDP or PD, but that we would want them to be able to, should the HOA or, managing body determine that they want to apply design standards and architectural requirements, that then they would be able to apply those. That was I think that's our desire here. I don't know if obviously.
So essentially you're trying to, So essentially you're just trying to leave the door open for HOAs to be able to set design standards.
So I think maybe we need some legal, so what we're hearing is you all would love to be sure we're not preempting an HOA from doing anything with what we draft here. So I think we need some legal guidance on that before we go to town council. So that's question one. I think we have to get that cleared up. Like, does what we do in this preempt HOAs? And then question two then is, independent of that, you all would still prefer to regulate the additions and detached structures to the degree that the FDPs set architecture?
Yes, because most of the rules and regulations in the HOA guidelines are designed to promote, well, I'll just call it a harmonious community. That's what we actually talk about.
Maybe keep it in the frame of what the FDPs are doing. So what's within the town purview?
So let me give you an example.
Yeah.
In downtown Superior, there are architectural guidelines.
Yes.
We passed them.
Yes.
They went through the FDP.
Yes.
If somebody comes and wants to build something over there, if it's a private home, we've already approved those. But if an office building decides that it wants to be built over there, it comes before Planning Commission, and we look at the architectural standards to see
Here's
whether
the
it
practical
matches.
challenge that we have with this. The practical challenge is that some of these FDPs include four-sided architecture for a home that looks like exactly what the new build looks like. It has no guidance for what an addition should look like. That doesn't, those FDPs, like, and I'm thinking about Rogers Farm, right? Those FDPs don't even contemplate any change to the exterior of those structures. And so as a matter of practice over time, we regulate to match those building elevations on the first permit. But if somebody wants to come in and do an addition, we don't make them amend the FDP to add on to the property. So that's where we have just left it as a matter of practice up to the HOAs to determine that it is compatible with their regulations. So it would be inconsistent with the practice we've done. And I think that's part of the reason why we wrote it the way we did.
As Amanda was saying, a lot of the things that the HOAs want is just to make sure that if you add an extension to your house, you don't paint it black if the rest of the house is white, you know?
Right.
I mean, we're not usually talking about we don't normally talk about major architectural things, although if people started doing build on ADUs, it would become more of an issue. We just want to be able to make sure that if people add on to we would let people build onto their houses now if they wanted to, but we'd want to know that, like Amanda was saying, that if you put a shed in your yard, that it's compatible, that you haven't just necessarily gone down and bought an orange tough shed and stuck it in your backyard.
Again, what we're trying to do here is to provide opportunities for ADUs to be built in certain areas. And the state law was passed so that ADUs can be built, but it didn't take away from the community the opportunity to regulate what those ADUs look like. We deal with size, right? And we had one that you said, okay, it's 500 to 750 square feet, whichever is larger. We could have picked the smaller. We could have said 500 to 750 feet, whichever is smaller. Am I right?
Well, not necessarily. So that example, so generally the rule is less than 50%. However, if you have a 1,200 square foot home, we have to allow up to 750 square feet because the state law says you can regulate the size, but you can't prohibit ADUs between 500 and 750 square feet.
Lisa, I think the deal here is that we just don't want you, we don't want you to, based on what Bria's said, we don't want you to write into the town code a sentence which takes away the HOA's ability.
I would agree. We don't want to do that.
And apparently that's how it works at the moment.
Well, yeah, I would
clarify.
Again, like wordsmithing, maybe it should say like the town won't enforce them on the ADU and like,
so maybe
or something like, you know, so that it's saying like the town's not enforcing or reviewing or whatever these, because clearly the PDs have these kind of antiquated architectural stuff that no longer applies and needs someone to review it to see reasonable architectural. And we want to say that the city's not going to be doing that. That's not on the city's plate, but this makes it sound like it can't be applied, where we want the HOA to apply it if they have the bandwidth.
So maybe your recommendation is, to the degree we can regulate as allowed in the state law, you would recommend that we add that back in, and then that gives us, we can figure out what the state law allows. And then two, that we're not getting in the way of the HOA's ability to regulate.
Yes.
Are those, without having to wordsmith tonight, is that kind of what we're hearing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Yes, that's right? Those
Yeah.
two things?
Yeah.
And
I
then
think that's correct.
we can work with the attorney.
Yep,
on
we'll double check with the
language.
attorney on all that, how to write it.
I have a couple other things, but I want to make sure we're finished with this one.
Okay, go ahead.
Can we go back to that other slide where you had this one? The 50, the number 2, that's what was mandated by the state.
The state, go ahead.
The state only requires us to allow ADUs between 500 and 750 square feet in size. So we can limit it to only allowing ADUs between 500 and 750 square feet. We have chosen to, our current code says 50%, and so that's where we got the 50%. And then we added the caveat for 750 square feet because we have to allow
So
up to
if the
750.
principal resident, the principal unit I have to use the right words, is 2,000 square feet. There can be a 1,000-foot ADU.
That's correct.
Even though the state just simply said between 500 and 750.
That's right.
And that's
So-
because our town board approved it.
That's right. So the idea is that we allow up to 50%, and we don't also, like, part of our conversation with the board was if you have a 1,200 square foot ranch and a 1,200 square foot basement, like, it would be silly for you to break your basement up into, and leave, 200 or 300 square feet of unfinished space because the code only allows you to build an ADU that's, a portion of your basement area.
I have less concern about basement ADUs and above garage ADUs, and I'm more concerned with the additional building that's going to exist that is going to be built.
Sure.
I think this is
Why
actually,
we have setbacks and all the other stuff.
So,
I
you're
think
right.
this is actually a done deal, isn't it?
Well, the 50%.
Because it's already in the
The
code and it ain't going
50%
to
is not a
change.
change from our existing code, which is what we allow in original town. So that's kind of where we started from, is like, our code says this for original town. Would you like to apply it for all these? And their answer was, or their direction was yes. And so that's why we have this written
Got
this
it.
way.
Okay. I got that one. All right, can I go back to number one?
Yes.
Sorry.
This is good conversation.
The
Go
problem
ahead.
is, you send me information, I read it. State law only requires that we permit ADUs for single-unit dwelling units.
That's correct.
Doesn't require that there be ADUs for two-unit dwelling units.
Correct.
Is there anything currently in the town code that refers to two-unit dwelling units, ADUs?
Yes. Our ADU code allows it in single unit and duplexes, and that's why we kept that. We asked the question when we took it to the board, whether or not they wanted to include the duplex lots in allowing ADUs, and they said yes. So that's how it reads currently, and that's how we're proposing to leave it.
One other thought, if you're open to entertaining something else, our code is not written to allow maybe an internal ADU in a townhome. So that would be something, we didn't open the door to that at this point in this first draft, but certainly open to your thoughts. If, say, a row home in downtown wants to convert their ground floor to an ADU, we would have to amend the code to allow that. And I think in that instance, a detached wouldn't really be feasible, but I think, again, an internal conversion of a multi-unit structure. Just to be clear, the code is not written to allow that, but would be curious to see how you feel about that.
I guess I was a little, I want to make sure that current town code permits ADUs on duplexes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. I was looking for that and I didn't see it.
It's under 166160 number. Only one ADU shall be permitted for each single-family dwelling unit or two-family dwelling unit on a lot.
Although in practice, it would be pretty damn difficult to build a separate ADU on a lot that already had a duplex on it, because you'd have a hell of a job meeting the setback requirements, et cetera, right?
Again, unless it was like a basement conversion or they were converting internal space of the existing structure.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still looking for it. But I'm going to keep on looking.
Keep looking, keep going, Renee.
Let's see, okay. These are the standards. So the maximum height of an attached or internal is equivalent to the maximum height of the principal dwelling unit, and then the maximum height of a detached accessory ADU is 32 feet, or whatever is allowed for the principal dwelling unit, whichever is less.
As you're going through, can you tell us if this is a change from our current or not?
So our current code in original town allows 32-foot ADUs. So we didn't want to create a scenario where the existing ADUs are non-compliant with our code. But we also didn't want to create a circumstance where an ADU can be taller than an existing structure. So if your code in, Coal Creek Crossing is, your maximum height is less than 32 feet, then your ADU height would be whatever the code, whatever your zoning says is the
And
maximum.
I think some of the ADUs in original town go to 32 feet.
They do be, a lot of the ones on top of garages are right at or
32.
near there.
Yeah.
The front setback for an ADU is the same as the principal dwelling unit. This is the same as our code today. Rear setbacks. This is different than what our code says. So this is one of the requirements of the bill, is that we allow ADUs, rear setbacks to be what's allowed for accessory structures, and if none are stated, then 5 feet. So if the ADU is attached or internal to the principal dwelling unit, the portion of the structure that contains the principal dwelling unit must maintain the rear setback for principal structures. But if you add on an ADU and the ADU is in that back section, then then 5 feet would be the rear setback for that added piece if it contains the ADU.
That was easily said.
It is clear as mud.
Just to be clear, that's required by state law, so
That's right.
why
Yeah, and we
changed.
emailed them to ask about this particular scenario. If someone adds on to their primary structure, is the setback of the primary structure allowed to be enacted, or do we have to set it at 5 feet? And the answer is 5 feet, unless you put the ADU in a different section and then add on to your primary home, and then it's whatever the primary.
We also asked, so we're I don't know how unusual it is, but pretty much all of our plan developments either explicitly don't allow accessory structures, which will have to under this ordinance, or accessory structure setbacks are silent. And so we asked the state, because in original town, accessory rear setbacks are 8 feet. And so one of our questions is, well, can we apply 8-foot townwide if that's a standard we already have? And they said, no, you can't create new standards that are more restrictive than the 5 feet if one doesn't exist today. So we did, because in our minds, we thought, well, if it's 8 feet in original town, it might make sense to apply that townwide, but we were told that wouldn't be consistent with the law.
Right, so that's what this table that we included in your packet goes through the plan developments and what would apply based on, basically, 5 feet applies to all of our plan development because of the way they're all written, to either not allow accessory structures or not discuss accessory structures as it relates to something like this. So, go ahead.
That's kind of weird that they're saying no accessory dwelling or accessory structures, and now that we're allowing structure, they're like, you can't regulate them because you didn't regulate, you just banned them, so now you can't,
right?
Which is bizarre.
So if you're,
but it sounds like you've talked to the state about this bizarre situation, and
that was their guidance.
Slapped you down.
I have a question, Renee.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how the lot coverage percentages will actually play out if somebody wanted an independent structure?
Sure. So the way that we review it in original town is anything covered. So the lot coverage, the way it's calculated by the town, includes anything that's covered. So like with a roof. So if you have like a covered patio or porch area that like is an extension of your roof for your primary structure, that area and the footprint of your home are what is considered for lot coverage. So then when you add the ADU, it's that additional footprint of the building, and then any covered or extended patio or porch areas. And then whatever the maximum lot coverage is as it's defined in the zoning or your PD. Most of the PDs do have lot coverage assigned. So we included that in here. Where? Did we not include that?
It's the
Oh, there
first
it is,
the
right
first
here.
column.
Yeah, so all of these except for downtown and Rock Creek have lot coverage requirements, or maximum lot coverage requirements. But if you don't have a maximum lot coverage requirement, we can't establish one for you with this code.
Is there anywhere that doesn't have a lot coverage requirement?
Look like it.
Rock Creek
Rock
does
Creek.
not.
So,
No, they have a lot, not a.
No.
no, so you can fill the whole lot now in 5 feet.
But that'll be where the HOA comes in, right? Because I bet the HOA has good regulations.
The HOA cannot regulate a setback for, I don't know, Lisa, could they establish a lot coverage calculation? That's part of a zoning thing. They would have to amend their PD.
I don't want to speak on behalf of what an HOA could do to
For lot coverage.
regulate ADUs.
I think that's very good. And I want that on the record.
I think that's chicken.
I am not an attorney that regulates HOAs.
Yeah, this is why I raised the issue before, and that is that the development of ADUs as a concept dramatically impacts the architectural and communities involved. And the answer to your question is, if the town says it's a 5-foot setback, it's a 5-foot setback, and I don't think that the HOA can do anything about it.
Well, yeah, and the state is like saying, I mean, this is a weird catch-22, because like previously, no accessory, so like the setback was the whole backyard, because you weren't allowed to have an accessory.
Yep.
But now they're like, oh, you can do the entire lot coverage up to 5 feet, like, and you can't like fix that later because, but yeah, that's a weird catch-22.
Which is why I wanted to leave architectural and development and other standards to the HOA and not even talk about it in terms of the ordinance.
I mean, I agree with you. I don't want anything in our ordinance. I mean, if an HOA has the authority under the state law to regulate it, I think it's up to the HOA to decide if they want to regulate it under what they can do in the state law. So I agree. I think we'll probably need to work with the town attorney's office to make sure whatever we adopt, we will regulate, but we're not preempting their ability to regulate to a greater degree under the state law.
And I'm going to come back to that when we talk about parking.
Okay. All right, side setbacks for internal lots is the same as the primary dwelling unit. Side setbacks for street side is the same as the principal dwelling unit. These are not changes from our code, so, and then the maximum lot coverage is what we just discussed. Look at that, parking. Off-street parking is not required. That is a change from our existing code. Our existing code requires one additional off-street parking. The bill specifically requires us to not keep that language. We are allowed to require parking.
I'll pull up do you have I'll pull up that. We have 3 sentences and they all have to be true. And if that's the case, we can require off-street parking.
Yeah, I don't
But let
have
me
Like,
Right.
I don't
And
have it.
And I
'cause
didn't
it's-
see that as part of our ordinance.
It is not part of our.
So parking, let me see, again, there's 3 circumstances that all have to be true.
It's the page 3 of your
Staff report.
information.
Yeah. So the 3 circumstances, it says we may require designation of so 2 things. If an existing parking space exists off-street, we can require that it be designated for use of the ADU, by the ADU. And then our 3 circumstances for where we can require new off-street parking spaces, again, these all have to be true. The ADU is in a zoning district that requires 1 or more off-street parking spaces for the single unit. There's no existing parking space on the lot, including a driveway, a garage, or a tandem parking space that could be used for the ADU. And the ADU is located on a block where street parking is prohibited. So all of that would have to be true.
Yeah.
All of that would be true, but that's not what's in the
That was, so the.
amendment.
Correct. So it is not part of our code.
Right.
We kept it just to not required. That was the recommendation of the council when we brought it to them. We asked them if they wanted to include that language, and
They said no.
they said no. We could, if you.
Y'all can recommend.
Yeah, if you have a recommendation.
Is there
otherwise.
anywhere in town where
All of
on-street parking is prohibited?
So
some of the alleys probably.
I think there's areas where no on-street parking is allowed, but those homes do have off-street parking. And I don't know of anywhere in town where we don't have an existing off-street parking space that we could dedicate to an ADU where on-street parking is not allowed. So
I mean, if people have a garage, if a home has a garage, that's an off-street parking space, right? So I
What
don't
if the
think,
garage is full of stuff?
but the garage exists. So again, I think because the 3 exceptions, we really couldn't think of an example where the 3 exceptions would all exist, that we could require 1 new space.
I think one thing, I mean, the problem is when you're talking about ADUs like this, like we are here, you think ADUs are going to be a big deal. But actually, I think at our last meeting, you were saying what? We might get requests for 5 a year or something like that.
I mean, I would assume that maybe in this first year, when we maybe make a good campaign to folks, hey, if you've converted a basement over the years or you'd like to convert a basement, right, come meet with us. We can, show you how to get it in compliance with building code. Maybe we get 20 on the high end in like Rock Creek, but after that, they're expensive. I mean, not everybody wants one. So communities do this, ADUs they do not proliferate quickly, generally.
So, I mean, in principle, depending on how many people are living in these ADUs, if you said it was an average of 2 and you got 20 in the first year, you might add 40 cars to the population of the cars in Superior, which doesn't really seem like, I mean, I wouldn't be trying to come up with complicated regulations to cope with 40 cars.
My concern is that with no regulation about parking in there, every ADU that is created is going to be populated by 1 or 2 more people than already exist. And the chances of at least 1 car being present are extremely high. And so the question is, where are we going to park that car? And if the provision that is currently being proposed in the code revision is that we don't care, we're not going to require off-street parking, then it's going to be either created parking, which no one is going to do because why would they do that, or on-street parking.
But again, the bill requires us to not require an off-street parking unless it meets all of those criteria. We could we could say that one off-street parking space needs to be dedicated, but then they just can say, well, I have a 2-car garage, so I'll make one of the or I have a driveway. Like, I'll just give them that space. And does that really change the dynamic? I mean, if you have existing parking on your lot and you're using it and you get an ADU, are you like, they have to dedicate a space, they can say they're going to dedicate a space, but it doesn't create a new space, which is what I think your worry is, right?
I guess I go back to the question of we're separating ourselves from what the state would we're doing this because the state said you have to do it. And we're doing it and by doing this particular one, we're saying, okay, well, since we have to do it, we're going to decide to do it in a certain kind of way, which in this case is less restrictive than we are permitted to be by the state law.
Yes.
And again, it's up to you if you'd like to make a recommendation that to a degree, the state allows the exceptions, we include those. I just don't know that there's a circumstance where all conditions would actually be valid. Go ahead, Ann.
Yeah. Another consideration, I think, is that once there's an ADU, if you're looking for a tenant, people will self-select if parking is not adequate for them. If somebody comes in, they have 2 cars, they have 3 cars, and there's no place to put them, they might choose to live elsewhere.
Except that one of the associated provision for that is you can't build an ADU unless you have parking.
We can't regulate that.
Well, we can to the extent that it says it's in a zoning district that requires 1 or more off-street parking spaces for a single-family detached home, and there is no existing parking space on the lot that could be used for the ADU, and that the ADU is on a block that on-street parking is prohibited. And what you're saying is that there are so few of those last 3
I can't think of a home that doesn't have a garage. And if it's an original town, doesn't have parking space.
I guess, are there streets in town other than those alleys that we're talking about where on-street parking is prohibited?
There's certain areas in downtown, but I don't know, honestly, that.
I mean, I don't want to beat
Those are
this.
probably townhomes.
But they have a 2-car garage.
They have a 2-car garage. I don't want to beat this one in the ground, but what I'm concerned about is that the construction of an ADU without required parking, without parking availability, or just not even looking at parking is simply opening a door to a situation which unfortunately we're never going to be able to close.
Right, but I think the state closed it, right?
I know,
The way they
I know,
wrote it. So, I mean, we could talk about it all night long, but yeah, okay.
Well, I hate to.
Is we've chatted about this for a while now. I mean, how many people really how many people would be, how many of us would be comfortable just going off-street parking is not required? I mean, can we just do a straw poll or something?
We sort of have no choice.
We have no choice.
We have no choice.
Yeah, okay.
Fine.
David wants to go home.
No, I don't want to go home. I just want to move on.
All right.
All right, so this is the timing. A CO for an ADU may be issued prior to a CO for the principal unit. This is part of our code today. So you can build an ADU without building the primary unit.
Without ever building it?
Yes,
Yeah.
so number 10 is exactly that.
Oh, okay.
I think one of those has been done in original town,
Yes.
actually.
Mhm. I think there's 2 that we've
2 now?
approved.
I know one. I don't know where the other one is.
And I think we did this for the fire victims that may not be able to build the primary anytime soon so they can live in their ADU until they can.
the owner has to reside on the property at the time that they apply for an ADU, unless it's a vacant lot. So the code is written in to say that if it's a vacant lot, then the property owner can apply. They don't have to
This is
reside
less
there.
restrictive than the current code, because I think the current code requires the owner of the main residence to be there while the ADU is occupied, right?
That's correct. This is
And
part
what this
of the
does is
bill.
this lets somebody leave their house and rent it afterwards.
That they can
as
rent
well
their
as the
primary and the ADU. But
This is the degree to which we're allowed in the state bill to regulate timing of occupancy. So this is the language that we are carrying forth from the state
Again,
law.
another example of we can't do anything about it.
Right, yeah. And the board or the council did want to make sure that the owner at least lives there when they apply, because that's what the bill allows us to do. And they said, yes, let's make sure we at least do that. Utility must be connected to wastewater and water of the principal dwelling unit. That's what our existing code requires, and we are allowed to carry that forward.
But how do you do that if you have number 5?
So you can build your ADU, and then when you build the primary, it has to connect to the sewer and water. So when we receive an application for an ADU that's going on a lot that doesn't have a primary residence, they have to size things appropriately so that a primary structure can be built on the lot. So they can't put the ADU right smack dab in the middle. They can't put they can't build a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom ADU and not have additional service to allow for a future primary.
I'm caught up in the wording, so I'm getting like Lonnie here. I'm going to not get it, because it says that the principal has to be there to be connected to, which it doesn't have to be, right? So
Yeah, so it says they have to be connected if they're both, if they both exist, then they have to be connected.
okay, that's not what it says.
You're not wrong, and I think we can look at that. I think this is just an outcome of like, we adopted a code and then we added a few provisions, and so we'll look at that and just make sure it's clear.
Manufactured homes on permanent foundations are allowed as ADUs, but mobile homes are not allowed as an ADU.
And I think this would be potentially, not to reopen this topic, but I'm going to reopen this topic a little bit. Because the state bill says manufactured housing can be allowed for ADUs, I think that could be a potential conflict with some of our architectural regulations, and trying to figure out how to apply the architectural regulations to the degree they exist. So that's jogging my memory, I think, too, on another rationale for that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Lots cannot be subdivided, so the ADU has to have the same ownership as a principal dwelling unit. And lastly, the ADU, if an ADU is constructed prior to the construction of a principal dwelling unit, the ADU is still an ADU whether or not the primary is ever built.
The article had something in between mobile and subdivision that was called deed restriction.
That was in our that's in our code
Right.
today. That's not permitted with the bill. The bill prohibits us from requiring or having any deed restrictions on ADUs.
I think the primary purpose for the deed restriction was the owner occupancy restriction, and now that that's going away, there's not a lot of purpose in our minds for filing a deed restriction on the property.
So let me ask then about what the deed restriction provisions we had in there. That the ADU shall not be sold separately from the principal dwelling unit.
That's right.
Is this now saying that it can be?
No. That's what, yeah.
That's
no.
what the subdivision.
That's correct.
ADU must have same ownership as the principal dwelling unit.
So a lot of it was already in the code. We just included it in the deed restriction language. But now we've eliminated the deed restriction because we can't have the owner occupancy, and most everything that is in the deed restriction language is part of the code.
I just get nervous when we take things out. I just want to make sure we're taking them out.
Fully understand.
Got it. Okay, go ahead.
Be thorough. Tell us if we missed something. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, okay.
This is the last one. We're on HB 241304, minimum parking requirements. This is for jurisdictions that have a designated transit station. We have a 1/4 mile buffer around that station that we are required to adopt language related to minimum parking requirements. So because we have the RTD station, that's a designated transit station, and therefore within a 1/4 mile of our RTD transit stop, we are adopting this DOLA guidance language in our code so that when and if we ever have residential development within a 1/4 mile of our RTD station, we will have to make sure that we meet the requirements for parking. Not require, we can't have a minimum parking requirement.
The little bus stops down Rock Creek Parkway, that doesn't trigger anything though?
No.
Okay.
So, that past proposal for the RTD site, it had some pretty, what I thought, not realistic parking requirement, like 0.1 per unit or something. Now, we would have to allow that under this.
Yeah, to the degree, yes, we would be preempted under the law for certain types of multifamily residential on
So
that property.
follow-up question, could we somehow include that as part of the marketplace, which would then get us around this 50%?
I don't know that we have a workaround that gets us around the state law. So we could pull up the map,
The
just,
RTD station, we'll all drive down to Broomfield.
There's no parking on the streets there.
No, there's no point, yeah.
I mean, you could park at Target, I guess, but like,
Well,
how does that work when they want to like housing department in like an area
so
that has
there's
no
nothing that says
on-street
the market can't provide housing, right? So sometimes the market for certain projects wants housing, right? Or wants parking, right? So if someone says, hey, you don't require it, but actually want to build it, we can't stop them from building it.
What do you want to bring up?
I was going to pull up the map so you could kind of see. It doesn't actually apply to all of the marketplace. If you go to engagedola.org.
I was looking at your map, and I must
Okay.
admit I found it a little confusing because almost all the areas seem to be exempt.
So that's the TOC bill. That's a different bill. But if you go to the land use and housing implementation, we'll pull up the map so you can see it's not all the marketplace. And then on the right side, drop down the minimum parking requirements. That second one down.
Oh, there it is. Sorry, I missed
And
it.
then the interactive map.
Yeah, I know that. I saw that one too.
Yeah.
So there's your 1/4 mile buffer. And so the language refers back to the state bill that adopted this map, right? So we don't have the map, we just refer to the state bill. That way, when and if we amend the Superior Marketplace PD,
We'll have to,
we'll have to exempt that boundary from.
So we couldn't add the RTD site to the Superior Marketplace PD and get around it?
No, I mean,
Nice try.
we're, yeah. No.
Can I, I was having a problem with the memo on this issue because the first paragraph seemed to indicate that we could not enact or enforce local laws requiring minimum amounts of parking for these uses that include 50% of use for residential within a quarter-mile buffer. Now, I want to make sure I'm reading that correctly, and that is that anything that is built in that area that has at least half of the floor area as a residential use, we can't have a parking requirement.
So there's a couple of different standards, and I'm pulling up the guidance from DOLA.
In other words, the however, what I'm saying is that the however piece, which is at the bottom, says to me that where there's more than 50% of the gross floor of the development is a residential use, that no off-street parking shall be required.
Yeah, so it's no off-street parking required for any new multifamily, right? So that would apply in the marketplace, or any adaptive reuse. So say somebody takes 50% of the PetSmart building and turns it into residential, then we couldn't apply parking. That's how I read that.
But what happened,
And
let's go
we
back to the
can't apply
proposal
it, but they
about building
can.
there at the RTD.
Then that would be new
That's new.
That's new.
Yes.
And so if it's more than 50%,
Of an adaptive reuse.
It's more than 50% residential.
if it's more than 50% of that building is residential,
Yes.
Adaptive reuse is 50%. So,
the adaptive reuse is more than 50.
yeah.
Okay,
So any multifamily development or any
reuse of 50%.
of 50%.
Got it. I didn't see a comma, so I was wondering where the sentence broke. Okay,
Sorry.
got it. Me good. It's DOLA, it's not you guys.
Or we don't know how to
No.
copy.
Or
and
we
paste.
typoed it. I don't know.
No laughing, Bria.
Totally possible.
I'm gonna say it's DOLA.
Yeah. They do not have a comma in their recommended language.
I have just one last question before because I'm sure that we're ready to move forward, at least to the extent that we can. So we have an existing duplex, which is essentially what used to be called a two-family unit, now it's called just a two-unit, right? On a piece of land, one owner decides that they want to have an ADU. So they submit plans to develop an ADU, and because it's only on one lot, the first to file gets the ADU, the second person.
That's how it's written.
Jinx.
You could change
We
it
used to call
that
it Coke, but
each
yes.
unit can have an ADU.
It used to say,
No, that's what it says in both our draft and in the current code.
Yeah.
So you could recommend that the draft code allows each side of the duplex to have an ADU.
we could do that, but.
Yeah.
Or we could
You
not.
could recommend.
Right, but the
you don't have
draft
to.
doesn't say that. Now,
The draft
sure.
does not say, the draft says that only one is allowed per lot.
per lot,
So if you have an ADU, or if you have a duplex, then only one of them can have an ADU.
right, and
Yes.
and what I'm concerned about,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how to answer this question, I'm concerned about is that one owner decides, because these are separate owners,
Mm-hmm.
they just have a common wall between them. I'm thinking lanterns, I'm thinking a couple of places in.
Lanterns, I
original
think, are
town.
separate lots. Some of our duplexes actually have a property line separating them.
Lanterns maybe two lots?
I think it's actually separate
Well,
lots.
if it's separate lots, then I'm not worried about them because each side could have their own ADU.
I think the duplexes in original town that exist are on the same lot, though.
They're on one lot.
So it is something we
And
have,
you
I
can't
think.
subdivide.
Right.
And so first to file gets one, and the other one, it's too bad because they don't even get a voice. Because one owner can say, I'm applying for an ADU, and the common wall neighbor says, no, can't stop it. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding it right.
That's how it's
And I
written.
think the answer is I am. And so I got a little concerned, but you've answered my question about lanterns, because if they're separate lots,
Lanterns are separate lots, so you're good there.
so there's no other duplexes in town.
Well, there's some 2 units in, like, downtown Superior, everything's on a standalone lot. Superior Shores has
Park?
Discovery, those are separate lots. I think it
Original Town is.
I think it is just the lots in Original
Plexes in
Town.
Original Town that I think are all each on one lot.
One lot. So
Yeah.
it may be only those 3 people that we have to worry about.
And as it happens, I don't know whether this is true, but I've heard that both units are actually owned by the same person. Is that true?
I
Do you
think
know?
so.
I don't know.
I don't know for a fact, but I think so.
That could change, though, so.
Yeah.
I mean, it could change, but
Well,
You're not wrong. We wrestled with it as well, I think. Welcome your input.
no recommendation. You answered my question about lanterns, which I was concerned about.
Lanterns,
because-
Discovery, and then anything in downtown that is 2 unit, I don't know if there's any like toll product that is only 2 units on maybe smaller lots.
Drove through there, I didn't
Okay.
see any. If they're
There is a 2-unit complex in Ridge. I know one of the buildings in the Ridge is just comprised of 2 units. But
just one.
I don't know. I know of at least one. But those again are on separate lots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That was my last question.
Okay.
I'm easy tonight.
Your lawyer brain, your lawyer brain is in full force.
does anybody
Read these things.
does anybody feel strongly that we should be trying to change this to allow 2 people?
Nope.
No, fair enough. Okay.
Can of worms.
And it sounds like, I mean, this is what we get, right? There's nothing we can do about this minimum parking thing. No. Okay.
Okay, Renee. Well, thank you for your presentation.
Oh, wait, there's still updates, though.
Well, so you'll have to make a motion on the
Hang
resolution
on a
in
sec.
front of
I
you,
think we need.
as long with any recommendations for edits to the ordinance when it goes to
Hang
town
on.
council.
We are actually, before we get to updates, we are, you would like us to approve a resolution, right?
With any recommendations for
And
changes.
the resolution basically says that we're going to adopt all the things that Lisa and Renee have put forward for us. And we, as far as I can tell, have one change. And I've been trying to wordsmith this while we've been talking.
So can I make a recommendation that are you wordsmithing how you're going to approve the resolution so that we can make the changes that you've requested
No,
that we
I'm just
make?
going, what I was going to suggest was it says section 1. I mean, do we have any more discussion on this or can we move to the resolution?
Yeah.
Okay. This says section 1, the planning commission hereby recommends that the town council approve the amendments to chapter 16 of the Superior Municipal Code as shown in Exhibit A, to which I was going to add, with a further amendment to allow HOAs to require compliance with community design guidelines,
We'll add that.
which I think is what we were trying to.
Architectural, what do we say, architectural?
Yeah.
You don't-
I think that's something we agree with, and I think we'll work with the town attorney to amend the ordinance before it goes to town council, that basically whatever is in the town ordinance doesn't preempt the HOAs from regulating to the degree they can regulate. So we will take architecture, setbacks, what have you, right? So kind of anything the HOA can regulate, they can regulate.
But
And we're
we
not.
should, I mean, we need to make a note of that in the resolution.
Yeah, so I think that could be a condition. We agree with you on that, just.
So, I mean, if Bria, if you want to change my language or improve it or put it somewhere else, that's fine.
Okay.
That's my suggestion for how we change the resolution.
And Bria, can you make those changes and then send them to us, and we'll get David's signature like another day so that he can sign the updated? Awesome.
Again, I would have just simply taken out that last sentence.
They feel like that adds to their plate.
Well, that's why, I'm just making my suggestion, but we'll let you guys play with it.
I think we'll work with the town attorney on that, but I think we understand. So also to clarify, concern one is we don't want to get in the way of the HOA's ability to do whatever they can. Concern two, do you also want to add back in the requirement that the town can regulate architecture on ADUs to the degree we're allowed? I don't know that I heard consensus on that one. No? Okay.
Well, you don't want to do that.
Just checking. There was a lot of discussion. Want to make sure we're good.
Come back out of that rat hole.
I didn't get anything from two of you saying that's what you wanted.
We don't, but you all can have your own opinions.
We can have our own opinion. Our opinion is to follow your lead.
Okay, I think just to keep things moving, I don't usually do this, but I'm going to propose this resolution and I'm going to incorporate the sentence that I just read, and I'll leave Bria to improve on it by the time it gets to the floor. So this is Town of Superior Planning Commission resolution number, I guess it's PC1 because we haven't had one this year.
Series 2025.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Series 2025. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the Town of Superior recommending approval of amendments to certain sections of Chapter 10 and Chapter 16 of the Superior Municipal Code concerning land use, all as described in Exhibit A, with a further amendment to allow HOAs to require compliance with community architectural or design guidelines. Oh. Can we get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Can we have a vote?
Yep.
We need a roll call, right?
All right. Chairman Harper,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rose,
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitty,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Mojo,
Yes.
Commissioner Gross,
Yes.
Commissioner Shanahan.
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you all for the really good discussion.
Thank you. Okay. Updates.
So, we have a council committee dinner, and we need to provide Michaela with 2 dates that work for us. And so I wanted to bring these, since I owe her the response by this week. I thought I'd bring it to you since we're meeting, and we can give her our 2 favorite choices here. I don't know. I'm not sure, Anne, if you were on.
I feel like
the
she
board
gave us
last
way
year.
too many choices.
I know, there's like a lot of choices, and they're first come, first serve, so I don't know how quickly other people respond, but I got it on Friday, so hopefully we can get ours in.
Well, we're probably, there was a committee meeting yesterday, wasn't there? Can't remember what it was. Or was it tomorrow? I don't know.
Next week.
Next week? Okay.
Is there a reason to meet at a certain time with them? And I don't have one other than the comprehensive plan and.
No, that's one of the things I was going to.
Monday.
One of the things I was going to ask is whether it would be beneficial at some point to have a combined work session with the town council, which we've done before to discuss things like the comprehensive plan. Huh?
I think Commissioner Whitty's, that's a good point, right? Like, I think, and in my mind, this spring, we're going to be doing pretty good engagement. So it might be an opportunity maybe in the May, June timeframe. We'll have that engagement. You all can talk really about it, make sure you're hearing from them, they're hearing from you. And if you decide, further discussions warranted, we could certainly set another date. But I think that's a good point to think about, just kind of where you will be in that conversation. So yeah, you're right, Commissioner Vaughn, those are all just the normal Monday town council meeting dates. So this would be, what, do they meet at 5 or 6? No, they meet at 6, so the dinner's at 6, and then you would meet for an hour.
Yeah, so I don't think Ann was here last year, but once a year, the town council meets with all of the committees, including the planning commission, and you just have, set up dinner in here. It's just
That was actually my first official.
Oh, was it?
As the planning commissioner, yes.
Ah, well then, fantastic.
Every night.
Well, I personally would vote, just because of the comprehensive plan issues, I'd vote for, is June the 9th too late? No, you're not going to have adopted it. I've got the...
Well, it wouldn't be adopted by then. I also kind of hate to postpone it too long, so,
May I suggest either the April 28th or May 12th?
Yeah. Well, they're fairly late too.
May
aren't they?
12th.
I'll say May 12th is the first choice.
It's right after Mother's Day. 28th would be the last Monday, and
they don't meet that Monday because of Memorial Day.
April 28th?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, May
28th.
I thought you were saying
No,
May. Oh, yeah,
yeah.
April 28th, okay.
Yeah, I can't make May 12th.
Oh,
so
make April 28th our
April
first choice?
28th?
First
As far as
choice.
I know, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I can make that work.
And
Yeah.
then, should I say June 2nd is our second choice,
I can
or?
get a better
Let's,
offer.
I can't be there June 2.
Okay. April 14th? That's early.
It's going to be, April 14th, I think, is going to be pushing it on
Yeah.
having
So
this
April
meeting.
28th or May 12th? We'll say April 28th is our first choice. so-
Okay. June, that's graduation.
Yeah, I was going to say March 24th, BBSD spring break, so I might be the only
June
one
9.
here that
June 9.
has a spring
June 9th.
break to worry
All
about.
right, so we'll say first choice, April
Yeah.
28th, second choice is June 9th.
Yeah. Okay,
Great.
sounds good.
All right, cool.
You might want to note that March 24th is during spring break. I know that the mayor has kids in BFEDS.
I know, I feel like that's not actually a town council. I think there's only one meeting in March, so I don't think that's a real choice.
Okay, yeah. I was just going to throw that out there.
Yeah,
Okay.
I should let Michaela know that too.
I know, I'm checking the town calendar. All right.
All right, thanks.
And then I understand maybe you had a question on some of the other state laws that were under discussion in the
I was looking
memo?
at the transportation oriented, the housing opportunities stuff.
Yeah.
Your memo made it sound completely crazy, but then I watched the video and I gathered that the town council agrees with me that it's completely crazy. So maybe I don't really need any further enlightenment on the process. This was a proposal to build something like 5,500 units in the
Zone
Superior
4.
marketplace.
Zone for
basically.
5, yeah, to zone to allow.
5,500. I mean, we're supposed to come up with a housing opportunity plan, which says how we're going to build, is it 5,500 units?
Sure, it's
In the space available.
just
in
20
Superior.
stories.
You get a great view of downtown Boulder from there.
Any updates on construction or anything going on?
Yeah, so a lot of the Bigsby's Folly, the building permit is issuable. They're just working through some issues on their end. Same thing with the hotel. Their building permit is in and issuable once they feel ready to break ground. Block 8, which is the residential block in downtown Superior. We don't have a building permit yet, but they are working through an administrative FDP amendment just to kind of refine some of the tweaking door locations based on building code, that they don't always do at the FDP level. But they are hoping to break ground in April. It's the last we heard. What other building permit
This is a
application?
curiosity question. Might get more than curious. What happens if they build the residential and then decide they don't want to do the life science building?
There's no
Separate.
obligation that they build it. I mean,
When it came to the planning commission and actually to the town board at the time, the whole thing was approved as a deal, right?
it's 2 FDPs actually. So the life sciences, it was like FDPs 11 and 12. And I think had we wanted to do that, we could have put a condition on there that said something, and again, maybe, the practicality of this withstanding, but, maybe the building permits for the life sciences shall be issued, on or before the building permit for the residential, but we have no such concurrency requirement.
Anything on the 55 and older?
Yeah, so Kite Rock Crossing is the affordable housing development in downtown Superior. We received notification that the Boulder County Community Foundation is going to give $500,000 to the project if we prioritize Marshall Fire survivors on first lease up, which we plan to do. And then DOLA through CDBG Disaster Recovery, DR dollars, has also committed to about $512,000 to for the purposes of infrastructure. So we've got a letter of commitment from both. Those grants are both going to run through the town, so those will come to town council as we get the language in those finalized. The state and new grants, as you might suspect, they're working through some challenges with federal grants. Some of these monies flow through HUD, but we feel optimistic that those are good. We did get an invitation to apply from the state for a land banking grant for $1.65 million that would cover the purchase of the land. So the town submitted that grant application on February 10th, and then the developer submitted for a 9% LIHTC tax credit award. That application went in February 3rd. So we are feeling optimistic. The 9% deal has to happen. I think all the rest really makes the deal very feasible.
How many units?
They're talking 48 to 50.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Any next steps on the comprehensive plan outreach?
Nothing really to update. We took, frankly, a week off last week of comp plan in our office. So, I know, sorry. So we are trying to put together the speakers for the speaker series. So we've got some ideas, and we all have our homework on kind of who we're going to be reaching out to for different panels and things like that. So
how
stay tuned.
are you going to advertise those? I mean, I looked at the Shape Superior website.
Yeah, we don't have anything on there yet. We'll advertise them on all the typical ways, emails, social media, website. Shape Superior will be updated once we have the whole plan and the dates for the open houses and
I'm
things.
still a big fan of state demographers.
Yeah.
I just reminded myself in big stars at the top with the 3 underlines to send you the demographer's office slide.
Well, and you may know Elizabeth Garner
I'm sorry.
retired recently, and so I don't.
Sadly.
I know.
Yes.
She was phenomenal. I did listen to the Boulder County one again, though, through the Boulder County Comprehensive Plan, and I think that would be something good to link on Shape Superior's website.
Even to just put it on the website.
Exactly.
Because she was spectacular.
She's really good.
She's so good.
Not only her presentation, but the manner in which
She's so
she
good.
delivered it was.
Yeah, the slides are one thing, but listening to her explain the slides is like, it's like a masterful story of, I don't know.
Yeah. The house, yeah.
It's easy to look at the numbers and it's easy to look at the graphs and everything, but she breathed life into it, which is interesting for a demographer.
Okay. Any more questions? Any more comments?
Yes.
Carry on.
Yeah, I had a couple of comments on the last meeting and
Yeah.
the council meeting, both related kind of to the comp plan. And I was thinking through things. I mean, we've got these key decisions on the opportunity areas, some more complex than others. But and I like the format that was presented in terms of having a single page on each opportunity area. And it did list some of the kind of site constraints. But I thought for me, it'd be nice to list, I'm calling them pros and cons, there's something like that for each site or potential change to really kind of highlight the good and the bad or whatever, or what to really consider. So that was one comment. And then a biggie that I'd like to see, again, being an engineer wanting numbers, is kind of looking at the cost consequences of each in terms of how it would affect the rate base. Would it be an expense to the town? Or, how much would it require capital improvements? Think Marketplace would make improvement. If if we make modifications there, that could be a lot of money in moving roads around. So all those would I thought would be helpful for me. But then I also thought in looking at that, that's going to be helpful information perhaps as we send these out to the residents to comment on. Figure whatever we can do to educate them so they know that it's, we're trying to look at the overall big picture for the town, and there's a lot of things to consider.
I agree. I think the additional considerations, and kind of things to think about for each scenario, I think are really good to add, when we talk about each of those sites.
Yeah, and one of the big picture goals, I don't know if it really came out that much, but the council has mentioned it, is town fiscal sustainability, and basically how we handle each of these opportunity areas, how it impacts that. I mean, we certainly don't want to do any harm, and to the extent possible, we want to try to make it better. So to kind of highlight that as I think a big goal of activities. So along those lines, this is fiscally, I guess if I were doing it myself, again, being an engineer with spreadsheets, I'd probably do a spreadsheet for each of the opportunity areas and try to do the best estimate of okay, if we do housing here, what's that mean? Or actually, take 76th Street for an example. One of the decisions is, do we do light industrial, or do we do housing? And how do each of those impact the rate base for the town? I mean, I assume industrial is better from a tax basis than residential, but, I don't know if we had residents there, they're presumably shopping at Superior, so kind of making a best guess at what, some assessment of it out. I realize but.
I think to some degree we can do, some fiscal analysis. I think it's difficult to kind of play out the percentage of sales tax dollars that a resident is going to spend in Superior that's not going to drive across the street in Louisville. But I think there's some good assumptions that we could kind of play out. I think one of the scenarios in a fiscal sense would have to be a do-nothing scenario. So you assume it stays as is, for the next 10 years, right? So what's the fiscal impact of that? And then where we have some choices in land use, model a couple of them. And we do have a small scope in our comp plan budget to actually model a few fiscal scenarios. I don't think we're going to model every opportunity area with multiple scenarios, but, to the degree we can pick a few representative sites and model, some high-level fiscal impact, that's certainly something we hope to do as well.
Yeah. So anyway, that would just help me, and we're going to have to make some recommendations here, and clearly after hearing Town 15 is going to be a complex one, so the more information we can get to use to justify whatever we wind up recommending, the better, and maybe more understandable to residents if it's not what they would hope for.
Yeah, we also hope to have some preliminary traffic numbers too with some different scenarios, right? So we add residential units in the marketplace, what would the traffic impact be?
Yeah. And actually, one thing on town, I wasn't going to talk about a different thing, but on Town 15, one thing, folks have mentioned that the open space master plan kind of included that as a recommendation. I didn't read it that way. They had it as an appendix with ideas what to do, but it wasn't something that it looked like was recommended. And it qualified it, say, nothing could be done here until town council acts on it. So it might have been, I had to read, that's my read on it carefully, but if you look at it closely or quickly, you might think that was a recommendation.
I think that's a matter of opinion, depending on who's reading it.
Clearly, yeah, but as I read it, it wasn't a recommendation. It was just in there some ideas.
It was their opportunity area.
I do have one comment about any construction that we do that is like close to open space, whether it's 76th Street, down 15, we could take the opportunity to make that like a model for fire resiliency.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I think from my perspective, wildfire risk isn't a reason not to build. It's more a reason how to build and what to build, but I don't think it precludes building. One of the things we didn't have on here tonight, but was in that packet that went to town council, as you know, is the state WUI code board that was impaneled under the new state law in 23. The draft code is out, the maps are out. Part of Superior will be subject to the bill to some degree. We'll have a discussion with town council, I think in June, to figure out kind of, do we want to just do the minimum, or do we want to do more than the minimum code that the state is bringing down? And so we'll be bringing that back, to folks as part of the discussion. But I agree with you. I think anything on really, and in my mind, all new development should consider wildfire risk. I mean, I think as we've seen, it hopscotched quite a bit through town, so.
Will the WUI come in front of the planning commission when we?
I don't believe so. I think it's all strictly within the building code. But we can certainly bring you updates, just, keep you apprised of it.
Any more questions? Any questions? Steve, Bonnie?
Nope.
Amanda? No? Good.
Thanks, bye, Bria.
You're
Bye.